Okay, Shalom, giving all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachakodash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that rule well, and Shalom to all you Akim that be pushing this word around the globe right now. So, to begin with, as always, I start by saying that we are the real Hebrew Israelites. The real Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Hispanics, Native Americans, and West Indians, also you West Africans predominantly. But you are going to get Israelites who look like the other nations, because Israel has been scattered amongst all people throughout our various captivities. But if your seed line by your father goes back to the man in the Bible that was named Israel, then you too are an Israelite no matter what you look like. So just going to do a lesson because obviously, as most brothers are aware, there's a lot going on in the world right now. Lots of prophecies are coming to pass very, very quickly. And right now the big topic or prophecy that's taking grip of the world right now is this coronavirus scare. Now, I just wanted to do a lesson going into why this is happening, because a lot of people don't really understand the Bible or the laws, statutes and commandments, and a lot of people who obviously may be new to this truth might not actually understand why this is happening. And there's a number of reasons as to why this is happening, but one of the main ones is that the Most High is basically bringing Esau's kingdom down. If you don't know who Edom is one of the sons of Isaac, who is the progenitor of you so-called white people today. You so-called white people are predominantly Edomites. However, as I just said, you are going to get Israelites who do have the curse of leprosy. But, predominantly, the vast majority of you so-called white people are Edomites, the descendants of Esau, whereas we're the descendants of Jacob, his twin brother. Now, this is all about the struggle for the birthright, which was given to Jacob by Isaac, which Esau feels he wants it back, even though he gave it away. That can be found in the book of Genesis, chapter 27, I believe. But I'm not going to go into that account today. What I want to do is go into why this earth is in the state it is, and why the Most High is jacking shit up and destroying it. This is Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, chapter 24 and verse 5, and it says, "The earth is also defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left." Now, that's, when it says the inhabitants of the earth are burned and few men left, that's talking about the great judgment that is going to be brought to pass in the world, which is known as the second death, which is going to be via thermonuclear destruction, because the Most High is going to send nukes all throughout the earth, but predominantly to America, to destroy that place, just like the way he did when he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis chapter 18. Now, I want to go into why the earth is defiled and the inhabitants thereof. So let me read this again. Isaiah 24 verses 5 and 6. "The earth is also defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, and broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left." Now those few men left are going to be the elect of Israel, the 144,000 and 1/3 of the nation of Israel. Those are the only men that are going to be left. Obviously, when I say men, I'm talking about mainly men, which is the 144,000, but also the women and children of the 1/3 that might receive salvation. So let me go into some of the laws and ordinances that have been broken in this wicked kingdom. Give me a second, I'm just going to pull some precepts here. Let me see. Bear me a moment. I think I'm looking for the book of Leviticus chapter 14 maybe. No. 15. Right, let me get Leviticus 15. So this is the book of Leviticus chapter 15 and verse 1. It says, And Yahweh spake unto Moses and to Aaron, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When a man have a running issue out of his flesh, because of his issue he is unclean, and this shall be his uncleanness. Oh no, that's not what I want. I want to get the uncleanness of a woman. Right, maybe 14 I want. Salakia, I thought I had it, but it's the wrong one. Yes, this is it. Leviticus chapter 12, Salakia Akim. I'll get into the uncleanness of a man in a moment, but I wanted to start with the uncleanness of a woman. So this is Leviticus chapter 12, and it says, And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Israel, saying, If a woman have conceived seed, and born a man-child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, according to the separation, for her infirmity she shall be unclean. And in the 8th day of the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. So basically, let me break this down. If a woman conceives seed and gives birth to a man-child, let's say a boy, she shall be unclean for 7 days after the birth, yeah? And also, the baby boy is supposed to be circumcised on the 8th day, yeah? Because as Israelites, it's our custom to practice circumcision, yeah? It continues on in verse 4. And she shall then continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days. She shall touch no hallowed thing. So basically, that's 7 and 33. That's 40 days the woman is unclean, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. So basically, the woman's supposed to be separate and unclean for 40 days after giving birth to a man-child, if I'm breaking this down correctly. But if she bear a maid child, which is a female, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, yeah, and her separation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 66 days. So that's 66 days, plus 2 weeks plus 66 days. So if a woman conceives and gives birth to a girl, she's unclean for first 2 weeks, then 66 days, so 66 days. So that's almost double, which shows you that women by nature are more unclean than men. Men are more holy than women. Holy means separate, and men are actually closer to God than women are. And in Leviticus 12 and 6 it says, And when the days of her purifying are fulfilled for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring a lamb of the first year and a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering, unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation unto the priest, who shall offer it before Yahweh, and make an atonement for her, and she shall be cleansed from the issue of her blood. This is the law for her that hath borne a male or a female. So this is the law. And if she be not able to bring a lamb, then she shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, the one for the burnt offering and the other for a sin offering, and the priest shall make an atonement for her, and she shall be clean. Now let me break this down. How many women in this society do this? Most women have a baby and they're at home, within the next few days, all up in the house, touching everything with their uncleanness, or sitting on public transport and all kinds of shit, man. And this is filthy. Now let me go back to, what is it? I just read Isaiah, I believe. Is it 24 and 5? Let me just jump there. Yes, Isaiah 24 and 5, which says, The earth is also defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, and broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. So basically, these women in the society are filthy, and they're defiling the earth, because they're not keeping the laws. Now, these laws were only given to the nation of Israel, but even if we was to just deal with Israel, most women don't practice these laws. So they're unclean and they're defiling everything that they come into contact with. So let's jump back to Leviticus 12 again. Let me just start there. Let's see what the previous chapter says. I'm trying to find the uncleanness of a woman. It's not in that chapter. Salakia Akim. Let me just find the uncleanness of a woman. Salakia, bear with me. Alright. So let me talk about the uncleanness of a man. So this is Leviticus chapter 15 and 16. It says, "And if any man's seed of copulation go out from him, then he shall wash all his flesh in water and be unclean until the even." Now, when it talks about the man's seed of copulation, that's basically talking about a man's sperm. So, to put it in layman's terms, let's put it this way. So basically, if a man busts a nut, it says he's supposed to wash all his flesh in water and he will be unclean until the even. Now, this is interesting because you've got a lot of Christians who try and say that, let me break it down in layman's terms. They say, if a man watches porn, he's going to hell, or something like that. Or if a man busts a nut, he's going to hell. That's not the case, because it's actually a commandment for a man to have sex. That is in Genesis. It says, "Be fruitful and multiply." That's actually a commandment. Let me get that. Yeah, that's Genesis 1 and 22. Let me just quickly jump there. This is Genesis 1 and 22, and it says, "And the Most High blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowl multiply the earth." Yeah? Let me bring out another one, Genesis 1 and 28. Let me start from 1 and 27. It says, the Most High created man in his own image, or I should say, so the powers created man in his own image, and in the image of the Most High created he him. Male and female created he them. And the Most High blessed them, and the Most High said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over everything that moveth upon the earth. See? So we're supposed to be fruitful and multiply. And even in Genesis 9 and 1, when Noah came off the ark, it says, Genesis 9 and 1, "And the Most High blessed Noah and his sons, and he said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth." So that's a commandment. And we're supposed to be fruitful and multiply, but unfortunately, because we're in our captivity, most Jake can't be fruitful and multiply because of the unrighteous decrees that Esau has created, and also stupid things like feminism and stuff like that. Those have the adverse effect on a man being able to be fruitful and multiply, because, for example, according to the law of the Bible, a man is allowed to have multiple wives, but in Esau society, that's not allowed. You're not even allowed to have more than one wife. So Esau doesn't want people being fruitful and multiplying, so therefore a lot of Jake in this society are sex deprived, and that's just how it is. So jumping back to where was I? Leviticus 15, I think. So when these Christians say things like, if a man busts a nut, or if he watches porn, he's going to hell, that's not actually true, because the law states that Leviticus 15 and 2, "Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when a man have a..." No, sorry, wrong ones, 15, 16. Leviticus 15 and 16, it says, "And if a man's seed of copulation go out from him, Does it say he's going to hell, or that he's condemned and damned for all eternity? No, it says, and if a man's seed of copulation go out from him, he shall wash his flesh, he shall wash all his flesh in water and be unclean until the even. Which means, let's say you busted it out at 8 a.m. in the morning, you wash yourself from head to foot, and you'll be unclean until the sun sets on that day. So that shows that a lot of Christians don't have understanding of the scriptures. There is Yahushua did say in the Gospels that if any man so much as even look upon a woman and lusts after her, he has already committed adultery in his heart. So you tell me one heterosexual man that walks around up and day and doesn't look after a woman and find her desirable. See, if a man even does that, then he's already committed adultery in his heart if that woman is already joined to another man, which most of these women are. Because a lot of these women who walk up and down in this society will claim they're not married, but they've already had sex. And according to the Bible, sex is marriage. So basically, you'd probably have to walk around in a blindfold not to break that law. Because the law also states that whosoever breaketh the least of these commandments and teaches them thus, they've broken all the commandments, roughly paraphrasing. And that goes back to the whole point that we are not saved by the law, we're saved by grace. Because no man can keep the law 100%, because even now, I'm sitting here, I'm wearing a t-shirt, and this is probably made out of mixed fabrics. We're not supposed to wear things like mixed fabrics. So it's kind of hard, it's practically impossible to keep every single law, statute and commandment. Let me give another example. We just had the Passover recently, right? So I, prepared the lamb as we're supposed to prepare it. But the thing is, how do I know if that lamb was either male or female? Because it's prepackaged lamb. How do I know that lamb didn't have a blemish on it? Do you know what I'm saying? So we can't keep the laws, but we're supposed to rehearse the righteous acts. And one way of rehearsing the righteous acts is this law here in Leviticus chapter 15 and 16. If any man's seed of copulation go out from him, he shall wash all his flesh in water and be unclean unto the even. Now, how many men even do that? There's a lot of men who will wake up in the morning, have sex with their woman before work, and then go to work without even having a shower or wash or a bath. Or likewise, they might have dealt with a woman the night before. They get straight up the next day and go into work. Now, let's say they're sitting on public transport and you sit in the seat after them. Guess what? Now you're unclean. Or let's say you go to work and you're working in an office and someone works a shift before you and they've done this type of thing. Then you sit in that seat after them to use the computer or whatever. You're unclean too. So the earth is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, man. Let me go further into this. And it says, let me read that again. Yeah, this breaks down what I was saying perfectly. Leviticus 15 and 16. And if any man's seed of copulation go out from him, he shall wash all his flesh in water and be unclean until the even. And every garment and every skin whereupon is the seed of copulation shall be washed with water and be unclean to the even. Yeah? So that means every garment, like, let's say you had a t-shirt on or something when you was having sex with your woman. Now that needs to be washed. The bed sheets that you want need to be washed. Everything that the seed of copulation touches needs to be washed. And it goes on to say, and every garment and every skin whereupon is the seed of copulation shall be washed with water and be unclean until the even. And the woman also with whom the man shall lie with the seed of copulation, they shall both bathe themselves in water and be unclean until the evening. So this is basically the act of having sex with a woman is actually, it has various stages to it. So that basically, in this society, a man might, have sex with a woman, then jump in his car, then drive back home, go to sleep, then go to work or whatever it is he does. But there's a whole process that's supposed to take place. And one aspect of this process is that after you've had sex with a woman, you are both supposed to bathe themselves in water and they'll both be unclean until the evening. But most people in this society don't do that. And it says Leviticus 15:19, and if a woman have an issue and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be put apart 7 days, and whosoever touch her shall be unclean until the evening. So that's basically talking about when a woman has her period, yeah, she shall be put apart 7 days, and whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean until the evening. So if she hugs you or you kiss her, you're unclean, yeah? Or even if she just taps you on the shoulder, guess what? You're unclean. Now that goes into the testimony that Yahushua gave, so the testimony in the gospel of the woman who had the issue of blood and she touched Yahushua and he felt unclean because he felt the virtue go out of himself because this unclean woman touched him. Now let me just give a personal testimony here. Me personally, I've always been very sensitive in my spirit. Like, I can tell when things are usually clean or not clean. Even before I came to this truth, I always got this feeling that, like, say I'm sitting on a train and some dirty ass person comes sit next to me, and I don't know, let's say they've been smoking or they've done some other kind of shit, I would feel unclean in my spirit because this person's next to me, you know, and I'd have to get up and move. This used to happen to me fairly frequently, especially if, like, say I have a bath in the morning and I go down the road and I'm waiting at the bus stop, I can feel these unclean spirits on these people when they're standing next to me. Now, this is a beautiful thing because now we've got this coronavirus lockdown. Most people in the society are practicing social distancing. And something I've noticed even more now is that because people are keeping further and further away, when they do come closer, I'm really picking up like, man, this man or this woman is filthy. I can't be near them because my spirit's very sensitive to this stuff. And when I did start studying the Bible and I learnt these laws, I was like, hang on a minute, this is how I've always felt. And now I have the reasons as to why. Now I understand why I feel these things. And speaking briefly also of this coronavirus lockdown, it's a beautiful thing actually, because when I'm walking down the road now, because there's so few people and because people are keeping so far apart, now I'm beginning to feel like, you know what, 2nd Ezra's, where it says, you know, the earth was made for our sakes. Now I'm beginning to feel like, hang on a minute, this is the start of the future for us, if we Lord willing are of the hopeful elect, because now we're beginning to feel like, hang on a minute, these streets, there's more space in the streets, so therefore it's starting to feel more like the world was made for the sake of us, which is what the scriptures say. But that's another topic. Getting back into the clean and unclean, yeah? So it says, Leviticus 15:19, it says, and if a woman have an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be put apart 7 days, and whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean until the even. And everything that she lieth upon in her separation shall be unclean, and everything also that she sitteth upon shall be unclean. So the woman is basically completely defiled in this time period. Everything she touches and everything she sits upon is unclean. And it says, whosoever toucheth her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the even. Now, how many men do you know who do this kind of shit where they deal with a woman, even though she's unclean because she's on her period, they deal with her, they lie in that filthy bed, and then they get up and they go, they sit in their car, they sit in their bus, they sit on the train, they sit in restaurants, they touching everything, and then they go to work and then, you know, sitting in the office chairs or whatever it is they do for a living, and then they go in their bed and their bed's unclean. So it's just basically all kinds of filth that is being permeated through these acts, yeah? And that's why, as I said in Isaiah, is it 24:5, the earth is defiled under the inhabitants thereof. And that's it, man. It's just defilement, man. So let me continue. And it says, whosoever toucheth anything that she sat upon shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean to the even. Now let's say a woman's on her period and she sits on the bus. And then she gets up and then you go on the bus. You've never seen this woman in your life. You don't know anybody sat in that seat before you. And you're clean. Let's say you're clean. You sit in that chair, guess what? Now you're made unclean. See what I'm saying? It's like something that I've always hated is having sticky fingers. For example, you know, if you use honey or let's use honey as an example. Let's say you're making something that's got honey, and a little bit of the honey goes on your fingers, and then you touch a knife. Now that knife's sticky, and then you touch a cupboard door. Now that door's sticky, and then you touch a cup. Now that cup handle's sticky, and guess what? How do you resolve that? You have to wash everything to take away that tacky residual sticky feeling. Well, that's the same kind of thing with same principle with uncleanness. So if you touch anything that is unclean, then you're unclean. Then if you touch anything else, that's unclean. You know what I'm saying? This is all about spiritual cleanliness, which is a concept that most people in this world they've got no understanding of. They don't understand clean and unclean and what can defile you, and what can defile your temple. You know, people don't understand these things because they're carnal, so they're only looking on a physical level, but they don't understand the spiritual aspect behind these things. And when you try and explain to them, they just don't get it. You know. So let's continue on. It says, "And whosoever toucheth anything that she sat upon shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the even. And if it be on her bed or anything whereon she sitteth, when he toucheth it, he shall be unclean until the even. And if any man lie with her at all, and her flowers be upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and all the bed whereon she lieth shall be unclean." Now that means if a woman has a period and you have sex with her during her period, then you're going off, because that ain't right, man. And you're going to be unclean for 7 days. 7 days of uncleanness, yeah? And all the bed where she lieth upon shall be unclean. Now I have met women, I'm not going to name any names and shame people, but I'm just going to give a brief testimony. There's women who I know who have said to me that they actually enjoy having sex more on their period. They say it feels better and they enjoy it more. So that's fucked up, man. That's fucked up, and it's just disgusting and it's dirty, and you shouldn't be engaging in that kind of shit. And any man who's doing that is going off, just in the same way that sodomy is going off. You know, you're not supposed to be having anal sex with anybody, be it male or female, because that is classed as sodomy. Actually, let me get that, because most people think to be a sodomite means like, or a man that has sex with other men. No, the act of sodomy is anal sex, basically, be it with a male or female. There we go. There it goes. It says sodomy, anal or oral copulation with a member of the opposite sex, or it can be copulation with a member of the same sex, and it goes into bestiality too. So that includes animals. You know, so sodomy is not something that we're supposed to be partaking in, but most people think it's safe and fine and fun to have anal sex with their woman. That's not, it's going off, man. So let's continue. It says, "And if a woman have an issue of her blood many days out of the time of her separation, or if it run beyond the time of her separation, all the days of the issue of her uncleanness shall be as the days of her separation, she shall be unclean." So that's talking about a period, yeah? "And every bed whereon she lieth, all the days of her issue shall be unto her as the bed of her separation, and whatsoever she sitteth upon shall be unclean, as for the uncleanness of her separation. And whosoever toucheth those things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. But if she be cleansed of her issue, then she shall number it to herself 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. And on the 8th day she shall take unto her 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and bring them unto the priest to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the priest shall offer the one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her before the Yahweh for the issue of her uncleanness. Thus shall ye separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, that they die not in their uncleanness, where they defile my tabernacle that is among them. This is the law of him that hath an issue, and of him whose seed goeth from him, and is defiled therewith." See, so all these Christians who say talk shit about, oh, you're going to hell, shows they haven't read these scriptures, man. Furthermore, heaven and hell are conditions that are played out upon earth, because the place of judgment is under the sun, as King Solomon wrote in the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, another thing is, this shows you that these Christians don't read these scriptures, because in the churches you have a lot of so-called black women, Israelite women, all up in these churches, be it, whatever church it is, be it Catholic Church, which is what the Northern Kingdom Jakes are all up into, or, the more Southern Kingdom churches, where they, more Judah, Benjamin, and Levi up in there, more of the dark-skinned tribes. All these women who are up in these congregations are filthy as all hell. but they don't know these scriptures, and they go up in there saying, "Oh, praise Jesus, praise the Lord, amen, and amen," and all this kind of shit, when they're completely unclean. None of them are taking 2 turtle doves and making sin offerings or anything. Now, to make it more balanced, we do know that the Levitical priesthood has been done away with, and that Yahushua is now the high priest and the mediator, so the law of sacrifice has been done away with. But the point I'm making is that these women are still proud. These women are walking around in great pride, thinking that their shit don't stink and that they're more holy than thou, when the vast majority of these women ain't holy at all, because men are actually closer to the Most High than women. Let me get that. Bear with me a second. Yep. This is Proverbs chapter 8 and verse 4. It says, "Unto you, O men, I call, and my voice is to the sons of man." So the Most High is dealing with the men of the nation. The only way the women have a connection to the Most High is through the man that they're with, which is why it's so imperative for a woman to seek after a man of the Lord. Because when these prophecies come to pass, when you get to Micah 7 and 10 and Isaiah 4 and 1, in those times of those prophecies, these women are going to be desperate to find a man of the Lord. But let me just read these last 2 precepts in Leviticus 15 once more. And it says, thus from 31, Leviticus 15 and 31, it says, "Thus shall ye separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, that they die not in their uncleanness, where they defile my tabernacle which is among them," which goes back to Isaiah 24 and verse 5. "The earth is defiled under the inhabitants thereof." Yeah? So going on to Leviticus 15 and 32, it says, "This is the law of him that have an issue, and of him whose seed go from him, and is defiled therewith, and of her that is sick of her flowers, and of him that have an issue of a man, and of the woman, and of them that lieth with her that is unclean." There we go. So I want to talk about one more thing before I close this lesson out. Just going to find another precept here, Salakia, bear with me. Where am I? Spiritual uncleanness is a real thing. Yeah, let me get Matthew 9 and 20. Right, so this is the book of Matthew chapter 9 and verse 20. It says, "And behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the hem of his garment." Now this is talking about Yahushua. She touched him. "For she said within herself, if I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole. But Yahushua turned about him when he had saw, he said, Daughter, be of good comfort, for thy faith has made thee whole. And the woman was made whole from that hour." So basically, in that account, the woman was unclean and she touched the hem of Yahushua's garment, and Yahushua felt the virtue go out of him. I think that's in another account. Let me try Luke 8 and 43. I might go and give a little bit more context. Yeah, this is the one I want. And it says, "And a woman having an issue of blood 12 years, and which had spent all her living upon physicians, could neither be healed of any." So basically, she'd gone to every physician she could find, and nobody had been able to heal her. And she spent a lot of money in this process. And she says in 8 and 44, it says, "Came behind him and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her issue of blood stanched. And Yahushua said, Who touched me? And when all denied, Peter and they that were with him said, Master, the multitude of the throng and the press of thee, the multitude throng and they impress thee, and sayest thou, Who touched me? And Yahushua said, Somebody hath touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me. And when the woman saw that she was not hid, she came trembling and falling down before him, and she declared unto him before all the people for what cause she had touched him, and how she was healed immediately. So she was actually going off because it was unlawful for her to touch him because she was unclean. But he said unto her, Daughter, be of good comfort, thy faith hath made thee whole, go in peace. Yeah, so basically that goes back to what I was saying about if you're a spiritual man and you're in this truth, you should be able to perceive spiritual uncleanness, and you should kind of know certain things that are going to make you unclean and certain things you need to be mindful of in terms of other people coming into your associating with people of the world, because basically the people of this world have no concept of spiritual uncleanness. But as men of the Lord, we're supposed to have the idea of this. Now we can't keep all the laws because we're still in this flesh, but all I'm saying is this is part of why the Most High is destroying his kingdom, because as I've read in the original precept, Isaiah 24 and verse 5, the earth is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, and it needs to be cleansed, and that's what Yahweh's going to do. Yahweh Shai. Let me read this again and close out. It says, Isaiah 24 and 5, the earth is also defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, and changed the ordinance, and broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left. Let me get one more precept, Isaiah 66 and 15. It says, For behold, Yahweh will come with fire, and with his chariots, which are what the world ignorantly calls UFOs, like a whirlwind, to render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by his sword will Yahweh plead with all flesh, and the slain of Yahweh shall be many. Now, this is the thing. What you've got to remember is that fire is a purifying agent, just like water is. And in the first death, which is the flood of Noah, the Yahweh cleansed the earth that way. But this time he's going to cleanse it with thermonuclear destruction and with the laser beams from the chariots. So, Lord willing, that's been an edifying lesson and given some understanding as to some aspects of spiritual cleanness and uncleanness, and Lord willing, it's been edifying. So with that, giving all praise and all glory unto Yahweh, Ba'Hashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem Chakodash, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who are continuing to rule and teach well, and shalom to all you Akim that be pushing this word in faith and truth and in sincerity. Shalom.